Most people believe disrespect begins when someone openly insults you. It doesn't. It begins earlier, when they quietly test whether insulting you will cost them anything. You have very likely felt this before. A colleague makes a cutting joke in front of everyone, then watches your face instead of laughing. A friend borrows something without asking and waits to see whether you mention it. Someone keeps you waiting, changes the agreement, interrupts you mid-sentence, or speaks to you with a tone they would never use on a person they genuinely feared losing. The action looks small. The observation behind it is not. They are measuring you. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but human beings constantly study one another for boundaries, consequences, and rank. Social psychologist Susan Fisk's work on social cognition revealed how quickly people judge warmth, competence, and power. Long before someone understands your character, they are already estimating what they can risk around you. And the first test is almost never dramatic. It is deniable. That is what makes it dangerous, because if you react strongly, they can call you sensitive. If you stay silent, they can assume you are weak. The test is designed so that they remain innocent regardless of what happens. You carry the cost either way. Most people fail here because they think only in terms of the event. You must learn to think in terms of the pattern being negotiated. The first sign someone is testing how weak you are is that they introduce small disrespect and immediately study your reaction. Picture a crowded dinner table. Glasses clink, everyone is talking. Then one person exposes something private you told them in confidence. The table laughs. Your stomach tightens. You force a smile because you do not want to make the atmosphere uncomfortable. And in that moment, something changes. The laughter is not the real event. Your smile is. They have learned that social pressure can make you betray yourself. You remember moments like this now, don't you? Times when someone said something cruel and you laughed to prove you were unaffected. Times when you swallowed anger because you wanted to appear mature. Times when your body knew a boundary had been crossed, but your mouth protected the person who crossed it. You called it keeping the peace. They may have interpreted it as permission. Every boundary you refuse to defend becomes a permission you never meant to give. This is why the first violation is often embarrassingly small. Behavioral researchers Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser demonstrated the foot-in-the-door effect. Once people accept a minor request, they become more likely to accept a larger one. In relationships and status games, the same escalation can appear in darker clothing. A small intrusion, then a larger one. A joke at your expense becomes habitual humiliation.
A late payment becomes unpaid labor. One unnecessary apology becomes a relationship in which you are always guilty. A person who once interrupted you begins making decisions for you. You think the problem grew. Often, it was simply given room. Julius Caesar understood the psychology of first impressions under pressure. When pirates captured him as a young man, they expected fear. Instead, Caesar mocked the ransom they demanded, told them to ask for more, ordered them to be quiet when he wanted to sleep, and behaved as though they were the ones inconveniencing him. He was their prisoner physically, but he refused to become their subordinate psychologically. That distinction matters. You may not control the room. You may not hold the highest position. You may not be able to punish disrespect immediately. But the moment you begin performing submission to make other people comfortable, you teach them to confuse your restraint with surrender. Silence can be power, but fearful silence has a smell. People notice the nervous smile, the excessive explanation, the apology you give before stating a reasonable need, the way you soften the word no until it sounds like
convince me. And once they notice it, some will press harder. Not because you deserve it, because weakness attracts experiments. The rare person understands that a boundary does not need rage. Rage often reveals that the other person already controls your nervous system. A real boundary can be quiet. The smile disappears, the eye contact holds, the behavior is named, and access changes. No performance, no speech, no desperate attempt to make them agree that they hurt you. You do not prove a boundary by explaining it. You prove it by changing what happens next. But small disrespect is only the opening probe. The second sign is more painful because it often comes from someone who claims to care about you. They will manufacture a situation in which saying no makes you feel cruel, and then watch whether guilt can control you. That is when the test moves from your dignity to your conscience. That is the second sign. They make your refusal feel like a moral failure. They do not simply ask for something. They surround the request with emotional pressure. After everything I've done for you, I thought you were different. Fine, I will handle it alone. You watch their expression change. Warmth becomes disappointment. Affection becomes distance. Suddenly you are no longer discussing what they requested. You are defending whether you are a good person. That shift is deliberate. Picture yourself standing in a dim hospital corridor. The fluorescent lights hum above you. Your phone is pressed against your ear. Someone asks you for money again, not for the first time, but after ignoring every warning you gave them. You say you cannot help. Silence. Then comes the trembling voice, the accusation, the reminder of every favor they once performed. You feel your chest tighten. You already know giving them the money will damage you, but refusing feels unbearable. So you surrender. Not because their argument is reasonable, because they have discovered that guilt opens doors your judgment keeps closed. Psychologist Roy Baumeister described guilt as a powerful interpersonal force. It can repair relationships and motivate responsibility, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a tool of compliance. A person does not need authority over you if they can make you feel selfish whenever you resist them. Some people do not respect your kindness. They study the guilt that produces it. This is where many decent people become easy to control. They believe having a boundary means becoming cold. They confuse compassion with obedience. They think love requires endless availability. It does not. Compassion considers another person's pain. Submission makes their pain your command. You may now remember a relationship in which every no created punishment. The unanswered messages, the dramatic sigh, the sudden withdrawal of affection, the way they became fragile exactly when you became firm. You thought they were hurt by your boundary. Sometimes they were disturbed by the loss of control. At the Hyphasis River, Alexander the Great wanted his exhausted army to continue deeper into India. His soldiers had marched and fought for years. This time, they refused. Alexander appealed to glory. He challenged their courage.
Then he withdrew into his tent for days, expecting shame and silence to break their resistance. It did not. The army remained still. The most feared conqueror in their world could command men into battle, but he could not make exhausted soldiers volunteer for endless war. Eventually, he turned back. That moment reveals something most people never understand. Pressure only becomes authority when you obey it. When someone becomes colder after you say no, do not rush to restore the warmth. Watch carefully. Their reaction may reveal what their affection was designed to purchase. Because a healthy person may dislike your answer, but they can survive your independence. A controlling person experiences your independence
as betrayal. And when guilt fails, the third test begins. They manufacture urgency to see whether panic can make you abandon yourself. The message arrives at 11:47 at night. "I need an answer now." Your heart accelerates. You have incomplete information. Something feels wrong, but they insist there is no time. Accept the offer. Lend the money. Cancel your plans. Share the password. Take their side. Make the promise. Now. They understand that a calm version of you might refuse, so they do not speak to the calm version. They create a fire and negotiate with the part of you choking on smoke. Daniel Kahneman's distinction between fast and slow thinking explains why this works. Under pressure, you rely more heavily on rapid, intuitive judgment. You stop examining the structure of the situation and start searching for the fastest way to end the discomfort. That is exactly what they want. The person who controls your sense of urgency can often control your decision. Most people believe urgency proves importance. The rare few ask a colder question. Important to whom?
Picture an office near closing time. The building is nearly empty. Rain strikes the windows. Your manager drops a folder on your desk and tells you the mistake must be corrected tonight. It is not your mistake, but they flatter you. They call you reliable. They mention how badly the team needs you. They stand beside your chair instead of returning to their office. They are watching. When you cancel your evening without objection, when you accept responsibility without asking who caused the problem, will the fear of seeming difficult make you sacrifice yourself? If you do it once, they may be grateful. If you do it repeatedly, they will stop calling it a favor. It will become your role. At Cannae, Hannibal presented Rome with what looked like an opportunity. His center appeared vulnerable and gave ground as the Roman infantry pressed forward. The Romans mistook movement for collapse. They advanced deeper, tighter, faster. Then Hannibal's formation curved around them. Carthaginian forces closed from the sides. Cavalry struck from behind. The Romans discovered too late that the opening had not been weakness, it had been bait. Modern traps are quieter, but the structure survives. Someone presents a crisis, you rush towards it, and only afterwards do you realize the emergency positioned you exactly where they wanted you. Your strength is not proven by how quickly you respond. Sometimes it is proven by how slowly you allow yourself to be moved. Say, "I will think about it." Ask what happens if you wait. Request the details in writing. Watch what happens to their personality when your panic disappears. If the opportunity is real, examination will clarify it. If the opportunity depends on your confusion, examination will destroy it. But the fourth sign is harder to detect. There may be no request, no insult, and no obvious pressure. They will begin comparing you to someone else, not because they admire that person, but because they want to discover which insecurity can make you perform. The fourth sign is that they compare you to someone else and watch which part of your identity begins to bleed. A partner mentions how confident their ex was. A manager praises the employee who never goes home on time. A relative points towards someone your age and asks why you have not achieved what they have. Listen carefully. The comparison may sound casual, but their eyes are searching for movement. A tightened jaw, a nervous laugh, an immediate explanation, the sudden urge to prove yourself. They are looking for the lever. Picture a quiet restaurant. Candles flicker against the glass. You are speaking about something you want to build when the person across from you interrupts.
My ex was already successful at your age. Then they reach for their drink as though nothing happened. You feel the evening change. You begin listing your plans, your progress, your potential. You reveal more than you intended because you are no longer sharing a dream. You are defending your worth. That is the test. Not whether you are successful, whether comparison can make you audition for respect. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory explains why this wound opens so quickly. You evaluate yourself partly by comparing your position with the position of others. A manipulative person does not need to invent an insecurity. They only need to direct your attention toward one and let your mind perform the punishment. Most people take the bait. They work harder for approval, spend money they do not have, become jealous of strangers, compete for affection that should never have required competition. They think they are proving strength, but frantic proving is often insecurity performing manual labor. Anyone who can choose your rival can influence your behavior. The rare person refuses the frame. You do not attack the person being used against you. You do not explain why the comparison is unfair. You simply ask what the speaker is attempting to achieve. Sometimes, one calm question is enough. Why did you feel the need to compare us? Now the discomfort returns to its owner. The room becomes still. The person who expected you to perform must explain the game. They may laugh. They may call you defensive. They may insist it meant nothing. But meaningless comments do not usually require this much protection. Watch the pattern, not the excuse. Napoleon understood the force of comparison. He distributed titles, medals, praise, and proximity in ways that kept ambitious men measuring themselves against one another. His marshals were not merely fighting France's enemies. Many were also fighting for position in Napoleon's eyes. Recognition became a battlefield. And when status depends on one person's approval, that person does not need chains.
They only need rankings. You see the modern version in offices, friendships, and relationships. One person receives warmth, while you receive criticism. Someone else is praised for behavior that is condemned in you. Standards move depending on who is being judged. You keep trying to become good enough, but the contest was never designed to end. Because once comparison makes you perform, the fifth sign begins. They withdraw attention to see whether you will chase it. Yesterday they were warm. Today their replies are cold. Yesterday they wanted every detail of your life. Today you can feel them pulling away, but they refuse to say why. You replay the last conversation. You inspect your words. You send another message, then another. You offer an apology without knowing your crime. They have done almost nothing, yet your entire nervous system is moving toward them. That is power. Picture yourself in a railway station beneath a grey morning sky. People move past carrying bags. The person you came to meet stands several meters away, looking at their phone. They see you, but their face remains blank. You approach carefully. You ask what is wrong. Nothing. The train screams against the tracks. They begin walking away. You follow, asking questions, offering solutions, shrinking with every step. You think you are saving the connection. They are discovering how little communication is required to make you abandon your dignity. Research on intermittent reinforcement helps explain why inconsistent attention can become so consuming. Rewards delivered unpredictably can produce persistent behavior. When affection arrives and disappears without warning, you may become more preoccupied, not because the connection is deep, but because your brain is trying to solve the uncertainty. You do not chase the person. You chase the return of the version they showed you before.
That is why hot and cold behavior can feel intoxicating. Relief is mistaken for love. When warmth returns after punishment, your body experiences release, and you call that release intimacy. It is not intimacy. It is tension temporarily removed. You can become addicted to the person who keeps creating the pain they occasionally relieve. Louis XIV turned access into political control at Versailles. Nobles competed for tiny privileges, attending his waking ceremony, standing near him, being noticed, receiving a word or a glance. Powerful people rearranged their lives around fragments of royal attention. The palace glittered, but beneath the gold was a system of dependence. Attention was currency, and uncertainty kept everyone obedient. The same architecture can exist inside one ordinary relationship. Someone gives affection when you please them, then removes it when you resist. Slowly, you learn to monitor their mood before expressing your own. You call yourself considerate, but you are becoming trained.
Think back to the person whose silence made you panic. The one whose approval felt like oxygen. The one who disappeared until you apologized, then returned without ever addressing what happened. You were not always missing them. Sometimes you are experiencing withdrawal from certainty. The strategic response is not to become colder than they are. That still makes them the author of your behavior. You simply stop rewarding unexplained withdrawal with pursuit. You ask once, you observe, then you continue with your life. If distance is being used as communication, a healthy person will eventually speak. If distance is being used as control, your refusal to chase will expose it. And that exposure often triggers the sixth sign. They will bring another person into the situation, not for advice, but to make you feel outnumbered. This is where the test stops being private and becomes social. And if you do not understand what they are building around you, you may surrender simply because the room appears to agree with them. The sixth sign is that they recruit an audience to make resistance feel impossible. A private disagreement suddenly becomes public. Your partner tells friends only the part that makes you look cruel. A colleague challenges you during a meeting instead of speaking to you privately. A relative repeats your mistake at dinner, then looks around the table for agreement. One voice becomes three. Now you are not defending a decision, you are defending your identity in front of witnesses. Picture a long dining table beneath harsh white light. Plates sit untouched. Someone tells a distorted version of what happened. Another person nods. A third says, "That does sound like you." You feel heat rising into your face. You know the story is incomplete, but explaining every detail will make you appear desperate. Leaving will make you look guilty. Losing your temper will give them the evidence they were waiting for. This is not conversation. It is a courtroom in which the verdict was prepared before you entered. Solomon Asch showed how social pressure could make people deny what their own eyes clearly saw. When a group confidently gave the wrong answer, many participants conformed at least once. Most people do not fear being wrong as much as they fear standing alone. The manipulator understands this. If they cannot defeat your judgment, they will try to surround it. Bismarck understood that power changes when an opponent becomes isolated. Through the edited Ems dispatch, he made a diplomatic confrontation appear more insulting and inflammatory. France declared war, while Prussia entered the conflict with German allies and stronger diplomatic positioning. The battlefield was prepared before soldiers moved. Modern people do the same thing with reputation. They edit the story, choose the audience, provoke your reaction, then present that reaction as proof. Do not fight every spectator. State the missing truth once, calmly
Precisely. Then watch who wants evidence and who only wants entertainment. The person seeking truth will examine the facts. The person seeking your humiliation will keep demanding emotion. But the seventh sign is the harshest, because it reveals that they no longer fear losing access to you. They cross a boundary you clearly stated, apologize beautifully, then repeat the behavior. The first violation might be carelessness. The repetition is information. Picture a dark apartment after midnight. A broken glass lies near the wall. The same person who promised never to speak to you that way is crying again. Their hands tremble, their voice softens. They describe their childhood, their stress, their fear of losing you. You comfort them. By morning, you are discussing their pain instead of what they did to you. Weeks later, it happens again. The words change, the pattern does not. You keep believing the apology represents transformation. But sometimes, an apology is merely the price someone pays to restore access. Remorse feels pain. Accountability changes behavior. This is where you must confront an uncomfortable truth. People learn how to treat you from what continues after they mistreat you. That does not mean their cruelty is your fault. It means your future response is now your responsibility. You may have learned to tolerate too much because tolerance once kept you safe. Perhaps silence protected you in childhood. Perhaps pleasing people prevented abandonment. Perhaps explaining yourself reduced conflict. Those strategies were not stupid then. But carrying them into every adult relationship turns old survival into present surrender. You are not becoming dangerous because you intimidate people.
You become dangerous when their disappointment no longer controls you. When guilt cannot purchase you. When urgency cannot rush you. When comparison cannot recruit your insecurity. When silence cannot make you chase. When a crowd cannot make you betray what you witnessed. When an apology without change cannot reopen the same door. You do not need to suspect everyone. One awkward comment is not a conspiracy. One mistake is not a campaign. You watch patterns, escalation, and what happens after you resist. That is the difference between paranoia and perception. Most people hear words. You study consequences. Most people defend their goodness. You protect their access. Most people wait until disrespect becomes unbearable. You notice the first experiment. Because the real test was never whether someone could hurt you. Anyone can. The real test was whether hurting you would change what they were allowed to do next. And the moment your answer changes, so does every relationship around you.